These are the survivors of the Maya collapse. They can be seen in the streets of Mérida, capital of the state of Yucatan in Mexico. Today, many Maya live as they have for the 1,000 years since the collapse of their classic culture. They live in small farming villages. They come to the city to sell their produce, returning to their villages where they converse in their native Mayan language. The rise and fall of the classic Maya civilization is a study of the power of kings. The rulers of the Maya accumulated power by building sacred cities, cities where the gods communicated with men. With the rise of the great cities came great wealth. As long as the cities prospered, the prestige and power of the kings were assured. This is the Petén, a tropical rainforest in Guatemala. Deep in this jungle are the ruins of Tikal, one of the great cities of the pre-industrial world. Here, tens of thousands of Indians worked in the shadows of these elegant pyramids. Then, incredibly, Tikal was abandoned. We know this because the Maya who lived here carved their history on stone markers. These markers can be found in nearly every Maya city. The dates on these stones, without explanation, stop at the year AD 900. It is as if some future archaeologist found that all our newspapers and books ceased publication in the year 2000. The tens of thousands of Indians that worked the farming terraces, erected the temples, and traded in the marketplace simply faded into the jungle. The Maya were not the first great civilization of the Americas. They grew from the ruins of an even earlier civilization, the Olmecs of the Gulf Coast of Mexico. There is little left of the original Olmec sites. However, the Olmecs left behind these huge carved heads. These are likenesses of the first great rulers of the Americas. Under their leadership, the Olmecs built the first great Indian civilization. Like the pharaohs of Egypt and the emperors of Rome, the kings of the Olmec and Maya cities inspired men to build enduring monuments to their power. One of the greatest of the Maya monuments is the city of Palenque. Here, the Maya burned the jungle, transforming the surrounding rainforest into productive farmlands. The farmers who worked these fields looked to Palenque's ruler for guidance. He had absolute control over planting, harvesting, burning, storage, and trade. This power emanated from the ruler's ability to look into the future. The future to the Maya could be understood by studying positions of the stars and planets. Like Stonehenge, these temples were designed to be architectural computers. Maya astronomers, using sightlines built into the building's design, could predict future astronomical events. To the citizens of Palenque, their king was a man with the power of prophecy, a man whose city was a conduit to the gods of the heavens and underworld. early theory about the Maya collapse proposes that the soil was depleted by overburning. This might explain why the Maya abandoned Palenque. However, this theory doesn't make sense if we examine another great Maya city. This is Copan in Honduras. Copan is located in a fertile river valley where the soil is replenished naturally. Here there is no need to slash and burn. Yet this great city, with its incredible sculpture, was also abandoned. As was true with Tikal and Palenque, nothing was built in Copan after the 10th century AD. Copan is filled with impressive sculptural representations. These are likenesses of real people, rulers whose lives are documented by these hieroglyphics. The kings of Copan presided over great public ceremonies. Here, in the central plaza, excited crowds watched the desperate ball game. This contest, played on courts like this throughout the Maya civilization, was literally a life and death struggle. The losing team, on at least some occasions, was taken to this private place. This court represents the Maya version of hell. Here, in full view of the gods of death, losing ball players were ritually sacrificed. To the Maya, blood sacrifice was a necessary part of the relationship between men and the gods. The blood of the sacrificed replenished the gods of the heavens, keeping order and regularity in the cosmos. For hundreds of years, this cycle of sacrifice, obedience, and ritual served the kings of Copan. The fall of Copan, Tikal, and Palenque are the subject of intense scientific speculation. The answer to this dilemma may be found along coastal routes used by Maya traders. On the coast of Belize, the eastern boundary of the Maya lands, archaeologists are excavating one such site. Here, they hope to find clues that may explain what happened in AD 900. Travel in Belize has changed little since the days of the Maya trader. The site, on a banana plantation, is not much to look at in its present state. Before digging can begin, the site has to be thoroughly surveyed. The work can be painfully slow, but the discoveries are significant. They tell the archaeologist about the date and type of culture that occupied this site. These pieces also have a lot to say about trading patterns. By analyzing these fragments, it is possible to determine with whom these people traded. Trade, as it turns out, has a lot to say about the Maya collapse. In the 9th and 10th centuries AD, the goods and trading patterns of the Maya changed radically. First, the trading routes shifted away from jungle sites like Palenque and Tikal. Second, there was a drastic decline in the trade of elite items. Many scientists believe there was a revolt against the kings of the great cities. Studies indicate that the average Maya citizen suffered terribly during this period. They evidently took it out on their rulers. With the rule of the kings broken, the Maya of the jungle cities retreated to small settlements. This is how most of today's Maya still live. In the northern Yucatan, the end of the classic culture came in a different way. This village is inhabited by Maya whose ancestors occupied a series of dreamlike cities in this vicinity. In this arid region, the rain god, Choc, is the central figure in the architectural drama portrayed on these buildings. Choc's favor brought life to the fields and and prosperity to the cities. In AD 800, Uxmal was at the height of its power. The kings of Uxmal, grown wealthy on the spoils of imperial rule, employed architects of immense skill. They built a city of dazzling originality. Uxmal, perhaps more than any other site, conveys a special sense of mystery and awe. Here in this court, the elite of Uxmal engaged in a ritual requiring an act of self-mutilation. The Maya looked upon the spilling of blood as a privilege, not a punishment. On sacred occasions, Maya kings would deliberately slash their own bodies. This loss of blood, archaeologists now believe, led to profound religious hallucinations. Here, on sacred occasions, the king of Uxmal pierced his own flesh, calling the gods into his presence. Here, the city became a mystical place, a warp in time and space, where the gods made their appearance before the mesmerized faithful. Like the other great Maya cities, Uxmal was abandoned. Here in this small court is an important clue about the eventual fate of these people. These skull images show an influence by a new group, followers of the god Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, was the supreme deity in central Mexico. In one of the strangest events in Indian history, a man took on the name of this god and conquered the Maya lands in the northern Yucatan. This is central Mexico today. Mexico City, capital of modern Mexico, is an amalgam of both Indian and European cultures. Here, Indian rituals are still a daily occurrence, even if it is just to collect money from a gathered crowd. These Indians are the descendants of the Aztecs. They are dancing on what was, before the Spanish conquest, the capital of the Aztec civilization. The Aztecs were the inheritors of a warrior tradition from an earlier people, the Toltecs from the nearby city of Tula. Central Mexico in AD 1000 was ruled by warriors from this city. In an act of incredible audacity, one of the rulers of Tula proclaimed himself to be the god Quetzalcoatl. According to legend, this would-be god was soon driven from Tula by rival elites. The man, Quetzalcoatl, expelled from Tula, looked for new lands to conquer. He found them to the east. It is traditionally believed that the man Quetzalcoatl conquered the Maya city of Chichen Itza. His arrival had a profound effect on the Maya. Chichen Itza is really two cities. The older Maya section is similar in style to Uxmal. Xoc, the rain god, once again dominates the design. The newer Toltec buildings of Chichen Itza reveal a disturbing trend. Under Toltec rule, Maya ceremonies became even more violent. Sacrifice now took place on a grand, unheard-of scale. At this huge court, the new Toltec rulers watched the sacred ball game with keen interest. Here, thousands cheered the rival players as they attempted to bounce a small rubber ball through this hoop. Spectators bet everything on the game's outcome, which often lasted for days. When the final goal was scored, pandemonium erupted. Winning players ran up into the crowd, pillaging the audience of any valuables they were foolish enough to bring to the game. Some spectators left the game as slaves, having wagered away their freedom. For the losing players, the outcome was even bleaker. They were taken to the Temple of the Warriors. Here, the priest, using a razor-sharp glass knife, ripped open the victim's chest. The still, beating heart was torn out and held up for the frenzied crowd. The gods of the warrior cult, the eagle and the jaguar, are shown accepting the newly removed hearts. The severed heads of the sacrificed were placed on this platform, the infamous skull rack, where carved images of the dead welcomed their new companions. Sacrifice was not limited to losing players. Dredgings of this water-filled sinkhole have revealed the bodies of women and children. Chichen Itza, with its mass ritual sacrifices, must have been a city in shock. This was a time of violent change, war, and declining resources. The Maya Dark Ages had begun. Maya collapse was brought about by many complex factors. Most scientists believe that sometime around AD 900, the agricultural system underwent a tremendous stress. Failing crops led to political disruptions. It is almost certain that in many cities, there was a revolt against the ruling elite. At this same time, the trading alliances broke down. Cities like Tikal lost the revenue gained by taxing the goods that passed through their territory. With trading alliances destroyed and persistent crop failures, the Maya were easy prey for warriors from central Mexico. This is what happened here at Chichen Itza. The surviving cities became competing fortresses, much like medieval Europe. Is a post-collapse Maya city. It is medieval in character. Massive stone walls protect the site. The elegance of the classic style has been replaced by the demands of self-protection. By this time in history, the Maya had suffered through a terrible era. But the worst was yet to come. The survivors who lived here at Tulum were among the first Indians to see the strange wooden vessels that sailed along this shore in 1518. The arrival of the Europeans meant that the Indian isolation from the old world was about to come to a cruel climactic end. When the Spanish conquistadors marched into the New World, they met a divided, warring people. This clash of cultures with its war, disease, and exploitation decimated the Indian population. Just as the Toltecs had conquered a divided Maya civilization, the conquistadors conquered an Indian population living in war and chaos. No one completely understands what happened to the ancestors of today's Maya. Their fall profoundly altered the development of Indian society and technology. Had this collapse not happened, it is possible that Maya technology would have evolved as technology did in the Old World. This might have included the discovery of metal weapons, making the Maya a formidable foe for the Spanish. After all, the Spanish effectively conquered most of a hemisphere with only the men that could be transported across the Atlantic. If the Maya and the other Indians of the New World had defeated the Spanish, the vast lands and resources of the American continents might belong to them. This is speculation. The reality is different.
There's TV worth watching on Channel 13. Coming up next, a famous actress's mysterious death is linked to a prominent citizen, and the consequences can be deadly. It's time to unravel another mystery with the help of Scotland Yard's ace detective, Adam Dalgleish. TV worth watching. Next on Channel 13.
For years, explorers have been finding the hidden ruins of Maya cities as they search the forests of this region. Today, in Belize, the search continues. Here, in the remote Maya mountains, the crumbled ruins of another ancient city have been discovered. An army of archaeologists and workers have chopped their way through miles of tangled wilderness in a desperate race to reach the lost city before looters can plunder its treasures. Overgrown by jungle, the city lies buried beneath centuries of decay. Sealed within the tombs of its ancient kings are answers to the fate of the mysterious Maya civilization. This is Caracol, the lost Maya city.
This is a Maya king. He ruled 1,000 years ago in Central America, in a civilization that was ancient long before the Spaniards discovered this world, when it was the only world. Maya. The word itself conjures up visions of lost palaces and temples in mist-enshrouded tropical forests. Who were these people? Where did they come from? And how was it that they flourished and finally died out as a civilization?
Well, the Maya and their neighbors, the ancient peoples of Mesoamerica, are fascinating to study. So are all the inhabitants of the Americas, because they constitute a more or less independent body of people. They constitute a unique laboratory of the rise of civilizations, because they were cut off essentially from the rest of the world.
This This isolation ended abruptly with the discovery of the New World. The invasion of the conquistadores witnessed the destruction of Indian societies, and the final remaining links to the ancient Maya were lost. They resisted the intrusion violently, but they were no match for the Europeans. Guns, horses, and steel blades were terrifying and alien to them. The conquest was swift and complete. The Indian peoples clung desperately to their centuries-old culture. Seeking to protect the ancient literature of their ancestors, they placed hundreds of their sacred manuscripts into hiding. Condemning these as superstitions and falsehoods of the devil, church authorities seized and burned these manuscripts. The priceless literature of an entire civilization was lost forever. Centuries later, we have come to regret that loss. Today, we want to know who built these great cities, which are now decayed ruins. Bringing their story to light is the task of archaeology. The science of archaeology developed in the deserts of North Africa. There, the discovery of the Egyptian civilization captured the imagination of a whole world curious for knowledge about its lost people.
And among the people who went to Egypt were the American writer John Lloyd Stephens and also the English, separately, the English illustrator Frederick Catherwood. And by a very happy coincidence, the two of them teamed up to pay a visit to the ruins of Copan in the first place in 1840.
Stephens and Catherwood embarked on a perilous expedition to Central America. They endured extreme hardships to capture, in remarkably accurate words and illustrations, the ruins of palaces, monuments, and temples. Stephens announced the discovery of another lost civilization. Here were the remains of a cultivated, polished, and peculiar people who had passed through all the stages incident to the rise and fall of nations, reached their golden age, and perished, entirely unknown. They are different from any other known people. They stand alone.
Stephens was perplexed when he tried to decide who had built these ruins. He and Catherwood produced this famous book, Incidents of Travel. They were bestsellers in the terms of those days. And that was what really brought the existence of the Maya ruins to the attention of the whole world.
Soon, expeditions to Central America began to proliferate and even compete. Explorers in search of adventure made pack mule expeditions a familiar sight. These expeditions probed the uncharted wilderness and discovered an astonishing galaxy of ancient palaces and pyramids. In their zeal to collect exotic artifacts, some expeditions plundered the sites they discovered. Treasures were hacked out and carried away to be exhibited by the museums of the world. The true treasure, scientific knowledge, was often obscured as parts of the puzzle were destroyed. But this period also saw the development of scientific archaeological techniques still in use today. It was during this great era of exploration that hundreds of Maya cities were discovered and cleared. And then, deep in the mountain jungles of Belize, mahogany lumbermen stumbled upon the ruins of an ancient Maya metropolis they named Caracol. 20 years later, an expedition led by archaeologist Linton Satterthwaite managed to locate a number of carved stone monuments. The expedition removed a number of the stones known as stela for safekeeping. These stones, intricately carved with hieroglyphic inscriptions, were created and shipped to the University of Pennsylvania Museum, where they languished mutely for over 30 years. If only the hieroglyphic code could be broken, the ancient past would speak. A new generation of scholars takes up the challenge of deciphering the mysterious hieroglyphic writing.
This stela here at the University of Pennsylvania is a monument that was found at Caracol by Linton Satterthwaite in the early 1950s. A stela is a rectangular stone monument, as you can see, that is often coupled with a flat stone altar. The stela is richly endowed with iconographic and glyphic messages that relate important events in the Caracol dynasty.
The inscriptions proclaim that dynasties of powerful Maya kings had flourished here. These royal dynasties continued to prosper here while the rest of the Maya civilization was beginning to disintegrate all around them. The scientists want to know why. Finally, 50 years after its discovery, an all-out search is launched to investigate the ruined city. The advance party arrives at Caracol. Finding themselves in the midst of a dense tropical rainforest, they must create space to live. This strenuous work is performed by Belizean workmen, many of them descendants of the ancient Maya.
I think the Mayas were my ancestors. That's what I think. That's my personal thinking. Because I know that I have Maya blood. I have some of the Mayan characteristics and traditions. I feel proud that my ancestors did a lot of things, but in other parts, I feel sad too, because we are far away from the truth and we can't do what they did. See, but in the very sense, I feel very proud of what my ancestors did here, and something that lasts up to these days.
The construction of a permanent camp to house the small army of scientists and students amounts to a reenactment of the past. The same building materials and techniques have been used by the Maya continuously for more than 2,000 years. While part of the team concentrates on the construction, others are dispatched into the surrounding jungle to search for Caracol's major buildings. Everything is completely covered with the trees and choking vines of the rainforest. Even so, new discoveries are made daily. A stairway here. Then, the walls of a temple. Slowly, the jungle gives way and the buildings of Caracol begin to emerge. From the beginning, the Caracol camp suffers a chronic shortage of water. This swamp is actually the remains of a reservoir built by the original inhabitants of Caracol. Filled with centuries of debris and weeds, this reservoir still holds enough water to serve the basic needs of Caracol's new guests. After weeks of effort, the camp is completed. Now, the monumental task of digging out the city is about to begin. Heading for several different work sites, troops of workers and students march out of camp to a virtual symphony of jungle sounds. Excavation is being carried out simultaneously in 3 promising areas of the city: the Observatory Group, the Machete Complex, and the Temple of Kaana. The Observatory Group, a cluster of important buildings, towers over the western portion of the city. Directors of the dig, Diane and Arlen Chase, of the University of Central Florida, climbed the face of a 12-story pyramid that forms part of the observatory complex. They have been working continuously for several years to plan and organize the Caracol archaeological project. Their efforts begin to pay off as these ancient buildings emerge from the debris.
All right, we need to get this planned, and that's planned up there so we can cut this all down. Right.
The Maya built stone causeways in and around their great cities. Several of these roads were discovered at Caracol, and this one was followed for 1.5 miles out of the central metropolis. It ended at this outpost, which the crew named Machete. The archaeologists will study this ancient equivalent of our modern suburbs.
You might have some well-preserved architecture in here after all.
They want to know who lived here and what role these people played in Caracol's society. Weeks of careful excavation have brought the scientists into the core of the structure. If luck is with them, this opening may lead them to a burial chamber. The Temple of Cana is the largest in the city of Caracol. The summit of this towering 15-story pyramid is crowned by 3 temples and a courtyard. Workers scaled a massive structure to continue the seemingly endless process of excavation. This important building will be the central focus of the dig. Workers will concentrate on this building because here, the scientists expect to find the tombs of Caracol's most important kings. Their time is limited. The forces of nature offer only a few short months of dry weather. The scientists want to capture as many of Caracol's secrets as possible before the rainy season descends.
The site of Caracol is a very good example of modern archaeology in the Maya lowlands, for it combines many different techniques. On the one hand, they are using traditional techniques of excavation, exploration, survey mapping. On the other hand, they are also bringing into the field experts in Maya hieroglyphic writing and iconography, the study of Maya art. And the combination is yielding spectacular results.
Well, Caracol is also a very important site for an archaeologist because it's one of the rather limited number of sites in which there are numerous monuments with long hieroglyphic texts which can be read. And there are tombs, presumably in many cases the tombs of the rulers who put up these monuments. And so it provides a very good chance of tying these things together.
The directors have been called to the excavations at Cana.
Okay, Cindy, let's see all this excitement. Okay. Here he is. Just looks like part of the skull and nothing else.
Nothing else, yeah.
This promising find appears to be large fragments of a ceramic vessel and a fragment of a human skull.
I don't think we can take this root out.
3 roots have grown down into the dig site and now hold pieces of the ancient artifact in a living, tenacious grip. How to remove them without further damage is the immediate problem.
Okay, I think this is a real nice surprise.
It is.
And it also dates the use of this particular building before they capped it over here. So it's a nice functional event.
The vessel's ability to help date this section of the temple is of great value. Considerable time and effort will go into rescuing this piece. First, the exact position of the discovery is recorded with photographs.
The same idea. Use one tape set out straight and another one perpendicular.
Next, coordinates are taken and the information transferred to a grid. The elevation of the find is taken with surveyor's tools.
0.82, 0.78.
In this way, a three-dimensional picture of the dig begins to take shape, indicating where each piece of the puzzle was first discovered. With this data recorded, the next step can be taken, but it's difficult to work the piece free of the roots. Great care is taken to minimize the damage. From chainsaw to delicate paintbrush, a variety of common tools is enlisted to coax the jungle to release the secrets it has reclaimed.
Just get this loose stuff off more fine.
Patient work with a dental pick finally wins the prize.
It's got a root stuck at the end. Not bad.
Out of the yards of loose soil removed from the area, smaller fragments of the vessel may be caught in the sifter. Large find or small, the same careful work is required, lest any fragment be overlooked. Once the site has been exhaustively combed, the pieces will be cleaned, sorted, numbered, and catalogued prior to the process of reconstruction. As Arlen Chase puts together this ancient jigsaw puzzle, he realizes the team's efforts have been well rewarded. Fashioned in the likeness of an underworld god from Maya mythology, the vessel was used to burn incense during religious rituals. The artifact could be a funeral offering to a Maya king. If so, the team may be closer to a royal tomb than they had even dared to hope.
In trying to construct a picture, an overall picture of the rise and fall of the Maya, there are a number of important elements still to be put into place. For instance, in the middle of the Maya classic period, there was a pause, a hiccup, which we call the hiatus, when all over the central Maya area, sites like Tikal stopped putting up public monuments. We don't fully understand that yet, but there are one or two places, Caracol in Belize is one of them, in which things went on as before. We don't know much about Caracol, and so this makes it an important site to study at the present moment.
The collapse of the Maya civilization is, of course, the great mystery of these ancient people. But the strange hiatus period seems to foreshadow somehow that great doom which ultimately befell them. Through decipherment of the Maya writing system, we may yet find answers to the perplexing problems surrounding the collapse of their civilization. Maya authority Federico Fassen.
What brings the Maya from the prehistoric peoples to our present-day modern world is precisely the understanding of their lives through epigraphy, which is the decipherment of their text and the written language. Every time I look at an inscription, I don't see just a number of designs, be they abstract or face variants as they are called, but I actually read the history, the living history of these people.
Early researcher Franz Blum developed a technique for examining badly eroded monuments. At Caracol, epigrapher Steve Houston uses night lighting to read the inscriptions.
As you can see from this raking light, a figure, standing figure. He's got that Roman nose that's characteristic of Maya lords.
Yeah, he's got a perfect Maya profile.
Yeah, check out that nose. It's a very arrogant snarl.
Look at the scepter.
Mm-hmm. His name is something like Smoking Forehead, and he's taken 9 captives in battle.
The kind of information that you might find on the nightly news is incorporated on the sides of these great stones. These people have left us then an opportunity to travel back in time and ask them what their world was really like. Not just put it together through the hard work and sweat of archaeological excavation, but ask them, what was the world like when it was the only world?
The Maya recorded their thoughts not only on stone monuments, but also on books.
This is a Maya book that we call a codex. It is one of a group of extremely rare books. Only 4 are known to exist.
These surviving manuscripts contain highly sophisticated calculations and interpretations of astronomy that guided the Maya way of life.
Every night, priests and apprentices would track the moving stars or the heavenly bodies we call planets through the star field to determine how to bring events in their own kingdoms into harmony with the movement of the heavenly bodies. The Maya kings were lords of time. Time was everything to the Maya. All time was cyclical. All eternity was cyclical.
These lords of time anticipated astronomical events such as eclipses. They developed a calendar more accurate than our own and recorded centuries of observations in their manuscripts. The ancient American astronomers held elite status in society. The very lives of the people revolved around the complex maze of endless cycles that were defined by the dual disciplines of sky watching and mathematics. The Maya have left us evidence of their mathematical calculations. They counted stars and time using numbers approaching the infinite. They were only able to do this by developing the concept of zero to mark completed cycles of time.
Maya astronomy, then, was very much tied to historical destiny. For the Maya, religion and science were one and the same. There was no distinction between the spiritual and the material. The stars were living things, human beings were living things, kings were living gods. And between them, harmony was achieved through the work of the king.
After weeks of excavation, a tomb has been discovered at Caracol's observatory group. A treasure trove of information may literally be lying at the scientists' feet. All that remains to be done is remove the capstones that seal the burial vault.
Okay, I see 2 large cylinders, a huge plate, probably tripod, and 5 other vessels. The bone is not in very good shape at all. Okay, Diane, you ready to try to get in?
Yep.
Good? Put your weight on. Hold on, we'll tell you, Dunvey.
I don't have to go to the bottom one.
Right.
Now, for the first time in perhaps 1,500 years, human life will re-enter the hidden recesses of this ancient burial chamber.
Careful. Okay?
Yeah.
All right, you want the ladder out of your way?
Yeah, take the ladder out.
Diane Chase makes a photographic record of the tomb before anything can be inadvertently disturbed during investigation.
Okay. The light's much better in here now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
What do we got?
12 and 15. Something else.
So it's a whole, it's a whole count.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 glyphs.
Okay, that's really good. It's a nice surprise.
There may be a name in here. Nope, Caracol emblem glyph. It almost looks like.
Emblem glyph?
It almost looks like an emblem glyph up here.
That would be nice.
I know, that would be real nice. I'll have to have Steve check it out, though. Well.
Capstones were often carved or painted with information, like a grave marker. The presence of the Caracol emblem glyph on the capstone would indicate this is the tomb of a high-ranking member of society, possibly an astronomer priest.
It's fizzing.
Steve Houston uses painstaking field procedures to bring up the definition of the glyphs.
Really very poor shape.
An overlay is used to trace the impressions.
One has to draw it centimeter by centimeter in order to extract any detail at all. Oshlahun Kib, Bolon, Kanasi.
Caracol emblem glyph is indeed part of the ancient text.
My guys.
A sudden storm interrupts the work at the tomb. Water damage could destroy the precious artifacts that have taken so much effort to uncover. The tomb must quickly be protected from the storm.
At the end. Jose, right down there. Okay. Okay. Move it forward. No, I think we can't. It's dribbling this way too. Pull the zinc. Pull the zinc down. A little bit more. Okay, you got it. All right. Get out of the way.
Everyone heads for shelter. But the rain has its advantages too. Scarce drinking water is collected while the crew waits for the storm to pass. Next day, sunrise finds the team back at the tomb, already hard at work.
Okay, we'll start with vessel number 6 first, since it's the one that's leaning over. Okay. Send it up carefully.
There you go.
Vessel 6? Yeah.
Right.
Get over the top.
Okay, vessel number 4. This is really the nicest of the Ahau vessels.
6 Ahau? Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. On. Vessel 2.
Careful.
With the nose, you have the stone.
As the Caracol dig enters full swing, a tremendous quantity of ceramic vessels, artifacts, and fragments begin to accumulate in the field laboratory. The pieces are carefully reconstructed. The remaining pieces are analyzed and sorted. All artifacts that are found become the property of the host country and will remain with the Archaeological Commission of Belize. The museums of Central America have been making progress in recovering artifacts originally found in Maya cities, thanks to changes in policy and international laws. Thousands of priceless pieces, such as these, in the government vaults of Guatemala, have rarely been publicly viewed and never previously photographed. Expertly created jade and ceramic speaks eloquently of the Maya creative genius. They provide us with a clear window to the past. Through their expressive art, we can actually see the Maya as they saw themselves, a unique and rare opportunity to view ancient people.
The Maya are famous for their painted pottery, and justifiably so. It is truly spectacular. But for the Maya, pottery was not just a special item used for putting into tombs. The Maya used pottery every day, the way we use beer cans and bottles and cups and plates. The Maya made all of these kinds of things out of pottery. But when you have these vessels painted and decorated as great birds and other demons, they are transformed from being everyday items to being something much more. Now they are vessels suitable for serving meals in the other world. And we don't know, when you see these vessels decorated, whether the visions shown on these vessels are human beings impersonating the gods, or they actually represent the gods themselves.
Treasure hunters, however, have already far surpassed scientists in accumulating valuable artifacts.
27.5, 27.5, 25,000. Going once, going twice. Sold. From lot 73, what am I bid for this absolutely authentic, late classic polychrome vase?
About 20 years ago, pots from tombs and jades from tombs and sections of stone monuments began to have a rapidly rising market value.
And since that time, in spite of armed government patrols, looters have been destroying ancient tombs like this one at Caracol.
This raging plague of looters began to spread all over the Maya area. So one can safely say that now there is not a single site in the Maya area which has not to some extent been damaged and partly destroyed from the purposes of scientific excavation.
The suburb of Machete was just discovered this season. Here, the archaeologists will examine the ancient way of life as it was lived far from the central city. Machete is an excellent place to study Caracol's social structure and learn more about the relationship of its working people to the ruling dynasties. Many man-hours have been spent clearing the structure of centuries of jungle growth. Now the scientists are at the very threshold of their goal.
What you'll have to do is just kind of jump and... That's okay. The flashlight?
Looks like a painted text.
What have you got on it?
Looks like a painted text. I can see a 17 keen, and there's a bunch of other glyphs, and that we're gonna have to get hold of Steve and get him up here to take a look at it.
Good.
Steve, we have a painted capstone with text out here in Machete.
Oh, fantastic. You want me to come out now?
Yes, please.
And down here has got to be the name of the event that occurred on that date. Probably this character's burial, and then his name. It's good stuff, though. Very nice.
The abundant markings on the capstones add to the growing fund of information about Caracol.
All right, but with the information you got, you'll be able to get a date?
Yeah, I think I'll be able to get the date. Yeah.
From notes taken in the field, the latest information is entered into the computer. As information accumulates, the scientists see a clearer picture of Caracol's importance. But how its powerful dynasties managed to flourish for so long remains a mystery.
Like ourselves, the Maya played games with balls. Indeed, most of our ball games are the direct descendants of American Indian ball games. But unlike ourselves, the ball game for the Maya was not simply a sport. It was much more. It was a metaphor for the cycle of life and death itself. So when the Maya played the ball game, they played it in deadly earnest. The Maya ball game was thus both a sport and a ritual. As a sport, it was played probably by everyone, but in ritual, it would be played by great nobles and kings, conquerors and vanquished. Now, the losers would be preordained. They would have been the individuals captured in war. Subsequently, they would be dragged off to a pyramid and beheaded. These games, then, were an affirmation of their central beliefs, a way of harnessing the bloody conflicts of warfare and turning them back into the sacred mystery of rebirth, regeneration, and prosperity. The Maya ball game was played in stone courts. These stone courts are found all over the Maya area. Often these surfaces were marked with great round disc-like stones that would mark the areas of the play. Now, exactly how these stones functioned, we cannot say. But we do know that inscribed upon many of them are victories and conquests and sacrifices of conquered kings.
Uno, dos, tres, vámonos!
At the dig, workers turn a round stone in hopes of finding new inscriptions.
Playing surface of the ball court stretches all the way from that line of stones to that side, which isn't very well preserved. In the center was this ball court marker that was presumably used in their scoring system, the details of which aren't very well understood. Okay, let's put down the paper.
Stephen Houston prepares to decipher an ancient inscription at the Caracol ball court.
That's a good position. That's quite good. Gauze, please. We've only got 3 sheets left, so we're going to have to do this properly. Let's include the word glyph, right? Stretch it out. Press down here on the edge as well.
The edge?
Yeah, we don't want to have such big bubbles. And this is the really interesting glyph. It seems to involve campaigns. A war campaign, in this case against Tikal by the look of it. It's Tikal emblem right here. It's very curious indeed, since most of the prior relations between Caracol and Tikal were congenial.
This discovery is extraordinary. It reveals a crucial aspect of Caracol's ancient past. The messages announce that the kings of Caracol directed a powerful military state during the hiatus period. This is exactly the kind of information the scientists seek.
We're discovering that the people of Caracol had a meteoric rise to great power in the Maya lowlands. That in the middle of their rise, they conquered Tikal, the greatest ceremonial center of the Maya. Traditionally, the ancient Maya have been regarded as a very peaceful people, but the fact remains, Tikal was conquered and Caracol flourished. Caracol's success in war against the great state of Tikal raises many more questions than it answers. How could these people do what they did? How could they defeat such a great nation as Tikal? Over and over, we see the Maya fighting these wars. You took the heart of the other government away from it. And indeed, the result would be disastrous ruin for the other community. If a great site like Tikal could be conquered by a relatively new and brash upstart like Caracol, then anything was possible on the battlefield.
Despite the risks of war, the Maya nobility were secure in the knowledge that their rule was essential to the cosmic plan. Their thrones and temples were seats of power, built in homage to their divine authority. No aspect of Maya creative genius expresses more clearly the strength of social order and power of divine authority than their architecture. John Lloyd Stevens wrote, "America, say historians, was peopled by savages. But savages never carved these stones. Savages never reared these structures."
Maya centers were studded with massive stone constructions. We call them pyramids, palaces, temples. We have many names for them that allude to our own history. What do these buildings really mean to the Maya? Well, first of all, any given building was probably merely the last of a series of constructions covering one upon the other, onion-like, to create a total structure that we find on the surface. For unlike ourselves, the Maya didn't drop their buildings into the basement with dynamite, rather they simply buried over earlier buildings to create new ones. Primarily, we find buildings that are used for coronation of kings, for the designation of heirs of the kingship, for the celebration of great wars and conquests. We know the hieroglyph for the word for temple pyramid. Huitz means the divine mountain.
These divine mountains frequently reached the height of 15 stories, proportions unsurpassed on this continent until the construction of the Flatiron Building in New York in 1896.
Although we will never know their names, the Maya must have had engineers, architects, and technicians whose business it was to design and create these massive buildings that we now find in ruin.
A unique and fascinating scale model of a Maya city was excavated at Tikal. The significance of this discovery is presented by architect Federico Fassen.
What the model shows me is that there was this mind behind what we see now that was able precisely to construct the buildings, the architectural monuments that we see that lasted so long. We see in the model not only temples, but ball courts and plazas, which are an integral part of the type of site that the Maya eventually lived in. We can compare them in sheer size and by the number of specialized activities that have been found by archaeologists to be contemporary to something like New York in our days, where you find a numerous series of activities being developed by civilization.
The Maya accomplished their architectural engineering feats with remarkably simple technology. Unlike our own architectural tradition, the Maya did not use the pulley, they did not use the wheel, they did not have draft animals. All labor was done by human beings.
A wall has collapsed during the excavation of the Temple of Ka'anah, causing much consternation among the workers. Precious time was lost. Belize archaeology official John Morris puts every available man on the job of digging out the rubble in order to return the excavation to square one. Then suddenly, the unexpected. Morris discovers an unusual feature of the temple revealed when the section collapsed. This opening promises exciting possibilities. What had seemed to be another aggravating setback in the progress of the dig turns out to be a source of discovery. Further activity is put on hold until the directors can be notified. John Morris and Arlen Chase discuss the best way to proceed. A thorough investigation is in order. With redoubled efforts, the workers continue to clear the immediate area. Thousands of tons of rock and rubble must be removed from Caracol before it is fully restored to its former glory. This process is undertaken by manual labor to minimize the chance of destroying any original construction. In some ways, this monumental effort is a mirror image of the ancient human toil that originally created the sprawling metropolis. The manner in which these blocks of stone are pulled from the trench on sapling skids may have been used centuries ago to raise the huge temples into position. Few people realize that miles of jungle growth must be cleared, acres of soil must be scraped away, tons of rubble must be removed before precious scraps of treasure can be sifted out and set aside for future generations to admire and ponder.
Just put them in a bucket.
The team's efforts are finally rewarded. The opening is quite deep. It may even be a passageway.
Wait, it's going to take a second, John.
The opening is enlarged and obstructions are removed. If, as they all hope, the opening is a passage, where will it lead? The archaeologists are quite certain that the temple is literally honeycombed with burial vaults. If good fortune is with them, they have discovered an ancient pathway leading deep within the temple. The next day, the chasers return to the dig site. Enough debris has been cleared to establish beyond doubt that the opening is a narrow passageway. They have found a stairway. Reaching deep within the temple, it may be an entrance to a royal tomb sealed shut for over 1,000 years.
All right, Diane, the two capstones that are just finally blocking entrance to it, sort of like the upper ones. The tomb is painted, has a huge text on the north wall. It's not a text, it's a red panel.
Although it's difficult to make out the contents of the large chamber, Arlen Chase is at least able to determine that it is a royal tomb. His preliminary inventory yields results that are surprising and confusing.
There is a painted capstone, and there's nothing on
There's
the
a painted capstone?
There's a painted capstone,
You
but
sure
no
there's
text.
nothing on it?
No text. I think it's a totally unfinished. I don't think the individual that's supposed to be in there is there. So they buried some animal.
He died someplace else.
Uh-huh.
So you can't tell what kind of an animal it is at all?
No, we can't.
All right,
It's
we have to
either
get a little
dog or
closer.
something like that. Dog, jaguar, who knows? The important thing is that the animal represents the human. But then what happened to the ruler?
Well,
we assume it's a ruler. Right.
I think you're probably right. I think it probably is a ruler. The only thing that I can think of right now is that for some reason, perhaps he died away from home. His body wasn't reclaimable, and so an animal was buried in his place.
It's interesting that what they did was bury the animal companion as if it were the individual.
Except for that it's not laid out flat. But then again, if we're talking
we
about
don't know. We don't know what kind of animal it is in the first place, but there are very few examples of this known.
I think we just have to wait till tomorrow on that one.
Yes, but we should know tomorrow.
With the first light of the next day, the chasers return to the vault, anxious to examine its contents more closely. A centuries-old secret is about to be disclosed. Years of preparation of the chamber, then hundreds of years of dusty silence, then more years of excavation have led to this moment.
It's a huge chamber.
It's pretty amazing.
Time, the great destroyer, has yet left some precious clues to the past.
The capstone,
I think it's got painting on it, Arlen.
yeah, it could. It looks very eroded, but you see it at either edge.
As they investigate, the chasers are drawn to the mysterious remains only dimly observed yesterday, which are now more accessible to scrutiny.
That's not a skull, Diane.
You're right.
That's a pelvis, and not only that, it's female.
You're right. That's quite a nice turn.
I think the most surprising thing is that this is a woman.
You know, you've got the clavicle in here,
Where?
right there.
Yeah, I see it. Okay.
Clavicle and ribs.
From what is known of the customs of this complex culture, it is reasonable to assume that the humble bones of this matriarch were once in death arrayed in splendor such as this. This female member of the royal elite might have enjoyed great power. Now the scientists must address the role of women in Maya society.
What's nice about this lady, too, is the chamber is incredibly impressive from the inside. I mean, it looks impressive enough from the outside, but when you're looking up from inside, it's huge. Anyway, regardless, it's an incredible find.
With this last great discovery, the short, dry season comes to a close. The rains are coming once again. The work at Caracol must stop for now. The jungle seems to wait in the changing air for an ageless cycle to be renewed. Only a tiny fraction of the great city has been investigated. Much has been learned, but much still remains a mystery.
The most common question asked of the Maya is, what happened to them? What about their disastrous collapse in the 9th century AD? It's the greatest catastrophe left to us in the archaeological record of the Americas.
Great civilizations rise and fall. Witness Rome, Egypt. Like ocean waves, they reach great heights only to be dashed against the shore of time. What then was the fate of the Maya, their kings, the people? Were they invaded, driven from their cities? There seems to have been widespread warfare. Was the collapse of classic Maya society the result of revolution or a loss of confidence by the people in their leaders, their gods? We are still asking the same questions. Even yet, there seems to be no conclusive answers.
So the collapse is a complex problem and an open-ended one. One thing is certain. With research at sites like Caracol, we are going to get closer to the answers to these very complicated problems. And we will unravel the mystery of the Maya collapse.
The Maya abandoned Caracol in the misty veil of the ancient past. For centuries, it lay buried in the jungle. Archaeologists struggled for decades to discover the mysteries of this lost civilization. They finally came to Caracol. As their work continues in years to come, the past will be revealed. The city will re-emerge. Perhaps the further we look back, the further ahead we can see.
There's TV worth watching on Channel 13. Coming up next, join Robert McNeil and Jim Lehrer for in-depth coverage of the top national and international news. Stay tuned for the McNeil-Lehrer News Hour. TV worth watching, next on Channel 13.